Being alone is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is often a sign that something is finally right. While the world rushes for noise, validation, and constant connection, the strongest transformations happen in silence. Growth does not announce itself. It happens quietly, when you step away from distractions and choose to build yourself instead. Most people fear being alone because they confuse it with loneliness. But solitude is not emptiness, it is space. Space to think clearly, space to heal, space to understand who you are without the pressure of other people's expectations. When you walk alone for a while, you start hearing your own voice again. This audiobook is about embracing that path, the path where you stop chasing attention and start building purpose, where you stop needing approval and start creating a life you respect. Because sometimes the moment you choose to walk alone is the moment you finally start moving in the right direction. Chapter 1. Why walking alone builds strength. Walking alone builds strength because it removes the illusion that someone else will carry you when things become difficult, and in that removal you are forced to stand on your own decisions, your own discipline, and your own inner stability, which is uncomfortable at first but necessary for real growth, because dependence weakens the self while responsibility sharpens it, and solitude places that responsibility fully back into your hands. When you walk alone, you stop borrowing identity from the people around you, because there is no crowd to hide in and no approval to lean on. And this absence forces you to confront who you are without distraction, without performance, and without pretending, which is where real strength begins to form, not in confidence, but in honesty. Strength grows in solitude because silence reveals weakness instead of covering it, and when weaknesses are revealed, they can finally be addressed rather than avoided, allowing you to build resilience deliberately instead of accidentally, shaping yourself through awareness rather than denial. Walking alone teaches patience because progress feels slower when there is no external encouragement, no applause, and no constant reassurance. Yet this slow pace builds endurance, teaching you how to continue even when motivation fades and no one is watching. When you are alone, your mind becomes quieter, not because thoughts disappear, but because they are no longer influenced by noise, opinions, and emotional interference. And this clarity strengthens decision-making, allowing you to act with intention instead of reaction. Solitude forces discipline, because without social pressure, you must choose effort consciously, and this choice repeated daily builds a form of strength that does not depend on mood, energy, or validation, but on commitment. Walking alone exposes fear more clearly, because there is no distraction to escape it, and by facing fear directly instead of numbing it, you develop emotional strength that allows you to move forward even when confidence is absent. Strength also grows when you stop explaining yourself, because solitude removes the need to justify your path to others, allowing you to listen inwardly instead of defending your choices outwardly, which builds inner authority. Being alone teaches self-trust, because decisions are no longer filtered through approval, and each choice becomes proof that you can rely on yourself, even when outcomes are uncertain or uncomfortable. When you walk alone, you develop resilience through repetition, because every challenge must be met directly, and every setback must be processed internally, strengthening emotional muscles that dependence keeps weak. Solitude builds strength by removing comparison, because without constant exposure to others' timelines, achievements, and appearances, you stop measuring your worth externally and start building it internally through consistency and effort. Walking alone sharpens focus, because energy is no longer scattered across social demands, unnecessary conversations, and emotional entanglements, allowing you to direct attention toward growth, learning, and self-mastery. Strength deepens when you learn how to sit with discomfort without escaping it, and solitude creates this environment naturally, teaching you endurance, emotional regulation, and calm under pressure. Being alone reveals your habits clearly, because there is no one else to blame, distract, or influence you, and this clarity allows intentional change instead of unconscious repetition. Walking alone strengthens identity because you begin defining yourself by your actions instead of your associations, and this grounded identity becomes stable, independent, and difficult to shake. Solitude builds courage because choosing to walk alone goes against social conditioning, and every day you continue reinforces the understanding that growth often requires standing apart. Strength becomes quieter in solitude because it is no longer performed for recognition, and this quiet strength lasts longer because it is built for survival, not appearance. Walking alone teaches you how to regulate your emotions because you must process feelings internally instead of projecting them outward, building emotional maturity and control. When you are alone long enough, you stop fearing it, and once fear dissolves, strength takes its place, because you realize you are capable of carrying yourself forward. In choosing to walk alone, you stop outsourcing your power, and this decision marks the beginning of real strength, the kind that does not collapse under pressure and does not require permission to exist. Chapter 2. Solitude is where real growth begins. Solitude is where real growth begins because it removes the comfortable illusions created by constant interaction, distraction, and noise. And in that quiet, you are finally forced to meet yourself without filters, without performance, and without escape, which is uncomfortable at first but necessary, because growth does not happen when you are constantly surrounded by voices that drown out your own. When you are alone, your thoughts become clearer, not because they become simpler, but because they are no longer competing with the world. And in that clarity, you begin to understand your patterns, your habits, your fears, and your strengths with a depth that no social environment ever allows. Real growth requires space, and solitude creates that space by separating you from the expectations, judgments, and influences that shape your behavior without your awareness, allowing you to choose who you want to become rather than continuing to be who you have been taught to be. In solitude, you learn patience, because progress becomes slow and internal, and this slowness strengthens your endurance, teaching you how to continue improving even when nothing feels exciting or visible. When no one is watching, your true character reveals itself, and this is where growth becomes honest, because you are no longer motivated by appearance or approval, but by the quiet decision to improve your life from the inside out. Solitude forces accountability because every result becomes yours alone, and with that responsibility comes power, as you realize that your future is shaped by what you do in the moments when no one else is present. In silence, you begin to hear your own voice again, not the voice of comparison, trends, or expectations, but the voice that knows what you need, what you value, and what direction feels true. Growth deepens when you stop explaining yourself to the world and start understanding yourself in private, and solitude provides that environment where reflection becomes possible and self-awareness expands naturally. Being alone strengthens focus because your energy is no longer fragmented by unnecessary interactions, allowing you to commit fully to learning, discipline, and personal development. In solitude, you confront your fears directly because there is nothing to distract you from them, and by facing them, you develop courage that is not borrowed from others but built within. Solitude teaches emotional regulation because you must process feelings internally instead of projecting them outward, and this skill becomes the foundation of emotional strength and maturity. Real growth happens when you learn how to be comfortable in your own company, because that comfort creates independence from validation and approval, freeing you to move through life with confidence and clarity. When you walk this path long enough, your sense of identity stabilizes, because it is no longer shaped by reactions or roles, but by consistent actions aligned with your values. Solitude reveals where you are avoiding your potential, and this awareness gives you the opportunity to choose effort instead of comfort, discipline instead of distraction. Growth becomes sustainable in solitude because it is not dependent on motivation or external pressure, but on routine, structure, and inner commitment. You begin trusting yourself more because you see what you are capable of building when no one is influencing your decisions, and this trust becomes a source of lasting confidence. Solitude sharpens your mind because it allows deep thinking, long reflection, and meaningful insight to form without interruption. In being alone, you develop resilience because every challenge must be faced directly, strengthening your ability to navigate life without collapsing under pressure. As growth continues, you realize that solitude was never emptiness. It was preparation, creating the foundation for the person you are becoming. Solitude is where the strongest versions of yourself are built, quietly, steadily, and without applause. And when you return to the world, you do so with depth, direction, and inner strength. Chapter 3. Stop chasing validation and find yourself. Stopping the chase for validation is one of the most difficult and necessary transformations a person can make, because validation has been used as emotional oxygen for so long that the idea of living without it feels like stepping into emptiness. Yet in that emptiness, you finally meet yourself without the distortion of other people's approval, and this meeting becomes the foundation of real identity and real strength. Chasing validation teaches you to live outside of yourself, constantly measuring your worth through reactions, attention, and feedback. And over time, this creates a fragile sense of self that rises and falls with every opinion, leaving you emotionally dependent on a world that is always changing and often careless. When you stop chasing validation, your mind initially feels unsettled because it no longer has its familiar reward system. But this discomfort is the beginning of freedom, because you are learning to exist without borrowing your sense of value from outside sources. In that space where validation used to live, self-respect begins to grow, not the loud kind that demands recognition, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing who you are, even when no one is watching, agreeing or applauding. You begin making decisions based on alignment instead of approval, choosing what feels true to your values rather than what will impress others. And this shift alone restructures your entire life from the inside out. As validation loses its grip, your relationships change because you stop performing and start showing up as your real self. And this authenticity either deepens connections or reveals which ones were built on image instead of truth. The fear of being misunderstood slowly dissolves because you realize that your worth is not determined by how well others comprehend you, but by how honestly you live your own experience. Without validation driving your behavior, your goals become clearer because you are no longer chasing achievements for recognition, but pursuing growth for meaning. And this makes effort feel purposeful instead of exhausting. You stop explaining yourself as much because the need to justify your choices weakens, replaced by a quiet confidence that does not require consensus to exist. The more you walk this path, the more stable your identity becomes, because it is no longer constructed from reactions, but from consistent action aligned with who you are becoming. Your inner world grows calmer because you are no longer scanning for approval or bracing for criticism. And this calm becomes emotional independence that no opinion can shake. Chasing validation once kept you in constant comparison, but now you begin measuring yourself by your own progress, your own discipline, and your own integrity. And this internal measurement system builds real self-trust. You realize that seeking validation was never about being liked. It was about wanting to feel enough. And once you give yourself that feeling through self-respect, the hunger for approval naturally fades. With validation no longer controlling your choices, your energy returns to you, allowing you to build, focus, and grow without distraction. And this reclaimed energy becomes one of your greatest assets. In this process of finding yourself, you discover that the version of you shaped by validation was only a surface identity, and beneath it exists a deeper self that is stronger, steadier, and finally free. As you continue releasing the need for validation, you begin noticing how many of your past decisions were shaped by the fear of disapproval rather than by what truly felt right to you. And this awareness can feel uncomfortable at first, but it is also deeply empowering because it gives you the opportunity to choose differently from this moment forward. You start to recognize how often you silenced your own needs, instincts, and boundaries just to maintain acceptance. And in acknowledging this, you begin the process of reclaiming your voice and your sense of direction. The freedom that comes from this shift is subtle but powerful, because you are no longer chasing belonging in places that require you to abandon yourself, and instead, you begin building belonging within your own life. Your emotional world stabilizes as your dependence on external reactions fades, because you stop riding the emotional highs of praise and the emotional lows of criticism, finding instead a steady ground within yourself. The more you live this way, the more you trust your own judgment, because you see that you are capable of navigating life without constant reassurance, and this trust becomes the foundation of true confidence. You stop seeking permission to exist as you are, because you realize that your existence does not require approval, and this realization brings a quiet sense of peace that is both grounding and liberating. Relationships become healthier because they are no longer driven by the need to impress or please, but by mutual respect, honesty, and shared values. You become more selective with your time and energy because you no longer invest yourself in situations where you must perform to be accepted, choosing instead environments that support your growth. As validation loses its importance, your life begins to align more closely with your true desires, goals, and values. And this alignment creates a sense of integrity that strengthens your character. You stop shrinking to fit expectations and start expanding into your potential, allowing yourself to become who you are meant to be without apology or fear. The more you commit to this path, the more resilient you become, because your sense of worth no longer collapses when things go wrong or when others disagree with you. You learn to stand alone when necessary, because you no longer depend on consensus for confidence, and this ability becomes one of your greatest strengths. Your mind grows quieter, because you are no longer consumed by thoughts of how you are perceived, leaving space for clarity, creativity, and focus to emerge. You realize that finding yourself was never about discovering something new, but about removing everything that was never truly you. And this realization feels like coming home. By stopping the chase for validation, you finally begin living from a place of self-respect, self-trust, and inner freedom. And this is where your real life begins. Chapter 4. How Silence Sharpens Your Mind. Silence sharpens your mind because it removes the constant mental interference created by noise, conversation, notifications, and endless stimulation, allowing your thoughts to slow down, reorganize, and become clear. And when this happens, your mind shifts from chaotic reaction into focused awareness. When you step into silence, you begin noticing how scattered your attention has become, how often your mind jumps from one thought to another without direction, and in that awareness you start to reclaim control of your focus, which is the foundation of intelligence and self-mastery. Silence exposes your real thinking patterns, because without external distraction, you can no longer escape your own mind, and this confrontation is uncomfortable at first, but it is also where insight, understanding, and growth are born. As you remain in silence, your mind becomes more disciplined, because it learns how to stay with one thought instead of being pulled in 1,000 directions. And this ability to sustain attention strengthens your concentration in every area of life. In silence, you start noticing subtle details you once overlooked, both within yourself and in the world around you. And this sensitivity deepens your perception, making you more observant, intuitive, and mentally sharp. The more time you spend in silence, the more your thoughts become intentional rather than reactive, because you are no longer constantly responding to external input, but choosing what deserves your attention. Silence teaches you how to listen, not just to others, but to your own inner world, allowing you to recognize what truly matters, instead of being driven by surface-level impulses. As your mind settles, problem-solving becomes easier, because clarity replaces confusion, and solutions appear more naturally when mental noise is removed. Silence strengthens your emotional intelligence, because you become aware of your feelings without being overwhelmed by them, learning how to observe instead of react. In the quiet, you gain access to deeper layers of thinking that are normally buried beneath constant stimulation, and these layers hold creativity, insight, and wisdom. Silence builds patience because it trains your mind to be still instead of constantly seeking movement, and this patience becomes a powerful tool in navigating challenges. With a quieter mind, your memory improves, your comprehension deepens, and your learning becomes more efficient because your brain is no longer overloaded. Silence also reveals unnecessary worries, because when external noise fades, mental noise becomes visible, and this visibility allows you to address and release it. As you continue this practice, your stress decreases, because your nervous system finally experiences rest from constant sensory input. Your decisions become sharper because you are no longer thinking under pressure, but from a place of calm awareness. Silence gives you mental endurance, allowing you to think deeply for longer periods without exhaustion. You become more creative, because creativity requires space, and silence provides that space for ideas to form and grow. Your confidence strengthens because you trust your own thinking instead of relying on constant feedback. In silence, you reconnect with your inner direction, allowing your choices to come from understanding rather than impulse. Through silence, your mind becomes a tool you command instead of a noise you endure. As silence becomes a regular part of your life, you begin noticing how much mental energy you once wasted reacting to every sound, message, and interruption. And with that energy now returned to you, your mind feels lighter, clearer, and more capable of sustained focus. You develop the ability to think before speaking, because silence trains you to pause, reflect, and choose your words intentionally instead of reacting emotionally, and this skill strengthens both your communication and your self-control. The quiet strengthens your inner discipline because it removes the easy escape of distraction, forcing your mind to engage deeply with whatever is in front of you, whether it is work, thought, or reflection. Over time, your attention becomes sharper because you have trained it in an environment where it is no longer constantly pulled away, and this sharpened attention carries into every area of your life. Silence increases self-awareness, because without noise you can no longer hide from your own thoughts habits, and patterns. And this awareness allows you to change what no longer serves you. You begin recognizing which thoughts are useful and which are simply mental clutter. And this discernment allows you to let go of unnecessary thinking. As mental clutter fades, you feel calmer, more stable, and more in control of your emotional responses. Silence becomes a place of restoration, where your mind recovers from the strain of constant stimulation and regains its natural clarity. Your creativity deepens because silence gives your mind the room it needs to explore ideas without pressure. You start trusting your own thinking more because you are no longer drowning in external opinions and influences. Silence strengthens your willpower because it teaches you how to stay with discomfort without escaping it through noise or distraction. Your perception of time changes because you are no longer rushing mentally, allowing you to experience moments fully. The more you practice silence, the more your mind becomes calm, even in busy environments, because you carry the stillness within you. You respond to challenges with steadiness instead of stress, because your mind has learned how to remain composed. Silence sharpens your intuition, because when the mind is quiet, deeper understanding becomes accessible. You begin to see clearly what matters and what does not, allowing you to prioritize your life wisely. Silence helps you reconnect with purpose because it strips away the superficial and reveals what is essential. You become emotionally stronger because you no longer depend on constant stimulation to feel stable. Through silence, your mind becomes both sharper and softer, focused yet peaceful, disciplined yet open. In choosing silence, you build a mind that serves you instead of distracting you, and that is one of the greatest forms of personal power. Chapter 5. Protecting your energy from the wrong people. Protecting your energy from the wrong people is one of the most important skills you will ever develop, because your time, attention, and emotional capacity are not unlimited, and every interaction either strengthens you or slowly drains you, shaping the direction of your life more than you often realize. Many people underestimate how deeply their environment affects their mental state, their confidence, and their growth. But the truth is that being around the wrong people can quietly sabotage your progress even when you are working hard, simply because energy is contagious and influence is constant. The wrong people do not always look harmful at first, because they may appear friendly, familiar, or even supportive. Yet over time their words, attitudes, and behaviors begin to weigh on your spirit, creating doubt, stress, and emotional exhaustion that you cannot fully explain. When you fail to protect your energy, you give others access to your inner world without boundaries, allowing their chaos, negativity, and insecurity to spill into your life, where it slowly weakens your focus and sense of direction. Learning to protect your energy requires awareness, because you must first recognize how certain people make you feel after spending time with them, whether you leave feeling lighter and inspired or heavy and drained, and that emotional signal is your internal compass. Some people do not want to see you grow, not because they hate you, but because your growth reminds them of what they have not done for themselves, and this unspoken tension often appears as subtle discouragement, sarcasm, or lack of support. Protecting your energy means refusing to absorb the emotional burdens that are not yours to carry, because many people unconsciously unload their stress, frustration, and unresolved pain onto whoever is closest, leaving you carrying weight that does not belong to you. You begin building emotional strength when you realize that you are allowed to choose distance, even from people you care about, if their presence consistently harms your peace, your focus, or your well-being. The wrong people often demand access to you without respecting your boundaries, making you feel guilty for needing space, time, or solitude. But protecting your energy requires you to honor your limits without apology. When you create distance from draining relationships, you create space for clarity, growth, and healing. And in that space, your mind becomes calmer, your heart becomes steadier, and your life begins to move forward again. Protecting your energy also means guarding your goals, because sharing your dreams with people who lack vision or belief can weaken your confidence before you even begin. And this silent erosion of belief is one of the most dangerous forms of sabotage. As you become more selective with your environment, you begin noticing how much easier it is to stay disciplined, motivated, and focused, simply because your energy is no longer being pulled in unnecessary directions. You stop explaining yourself to those who do not understand your path, because you realize that not everyone needs access to your plans, your struggles, or your inner world, and this privacy becomes a form of protection. The more you protect your energy, the more your self-respect grows, because you are demonstrating to yourself that your peace, your time, and your future matter. You start choosing relationships that support your growth rather than slow it, understanding that alignment is more important than familiarity, and this shift transforms the quality of your life. Protecting your energy teaches you how to be alone without feeling lonely, because you stop clinging to unhealthy connections out of fear of isolation and begin enjoying the strength that comes from emotional independence. As your environment becomes healthier, your thinking becomes clearer, your emotions stabilize, and your confidence deepens, because you are no longer constantly recovering from unnecessary emotional battles. You realize that many of your past struggles were not caused by your circumstances, but by the people you allowed too close without boundaries, and this realization gives you the power to change your future. Protecting your energy is not about becoming cold or distant, but about becoming intentional, choosing where your life force flows, instead of letting it be consumed by anything that reaches for it. When you finally take responsibility for your energy, you begin living with greater peace, stronger focus, and deeper self-trust, because your life is no longer being shaped by the wrong people. As you continue protecting your energy, you begin noticing how much more stable your emotions become, because you are no longer constantly reacting to other people's moods, problems, and expectations. And this emotional stability gives you the clarity to make better decisions about your life. You become more aware of your own needs, because you finally have the mental space to listen to yourself instead of constantly responding to others. And this self-awareness strengthens your sense of direction and purpose. The habit of protecting your energy changes your daily experience, because you start each day with intention instead of exhaustion, and this shift alone increases your productivity, focus, and overall well-being. You stop feeling responsible for fixing other people's problems, recognizing that their growth is their responsibility, just as yours is yours, and this understanding frees you from unnecessary emotional labor. As you become more selective, you discover that true connection feels lighter, safer, and more nourishing, because it is built on mutual respect rather than emotional dependence or obligation. Your boundaries become clearer, because you understand what you can give without losing yourself, and what you must protect in order to remain whole. Protecting your energy helps you recover your sense of personal power, because you are no longer allowing others to dictate how you feel, think, or move through the world. You become more comfortable with saying no, because you realize that every yes you give away without intention is energy taken from your future. This shift makes your time feel more valuable, because you begin treating each moment as something precious rather than something to be spent on whatever demands your attention. As your life becomes quieter and more focused, your goals feel more reachable, because your energy is finally aligned with your purpose. You begin recognizing the difference between people who truly support you and those who simply enjoy your presence without contributing to your growth. This clarity allows you to cultivate relationships that inspire you, challenge you, and walk alongside you, rather than pulling you backward. Protecting your energy also strengthens your confidence, because you see that you are capable of creating a life that feels balanced, intentional, and self-directed. Your inner world becomes calmer because there is less emotional noise, less tension, and fewer internal conflicts competing for your attention. You start trusting yourself more because you are honoring your instincts instead of ignoring them to please others. This trust becomes a foundation of self-respect, which influences every area of your life. As your boundaries strengthen, your sense of freedom grows because you are no longer living under constant emotional pressure. You begin to feel more aligned with your true self because your choices now reflect your values rather than your fears. The more you protect your energy, the more peaceful your life becomes, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer drained by the wrong influences. By choosing where your energy flows, you shape your future with clarity, strength, and purpose. And this is one of the most powerful decisions you will ever make. Chapter 6. Why being alone creates emotional power. Being alone creates emotional power because it removes the emotional noise that constantly interferes with your inner world, allowing you to finally experience your own thoughts, feelings, and reactions without external influence. And this clarity becomes the foundation of emotional strength and self-mastery. When you are alone, you stop unconsciously adjusting yourself to fit other people's moods, expectations, and opinions. And this freedom allows your true emotional landscape to emerge, revealing what you actually feel instead of what you think you should feel. Emotional power grows in solitude because you are forced to process your experiences instead of escaping them. And through that processing, you build resilience, understanding, and control over your inner state. Without constant distraction, you become aware of emotional patterns that once controlled you silently. And this awareness gives you the opportunity to change them instead of being ruled by them. Being alone teaches you how to sit with discomfort without being consumed by it. And this ability strengthens your emotional endurance, making you less reactive and more composed in difficult situations. Emotional power develops when you no longer depend on others to regulate how you feel, because you learn how to stabilize your own inner world regardless of circumstances. Solitude removes emotional dependency, replacing it with self-reliance, and this shift creates a sense of confidence that cannot be shaken by approval or rejection. When you spend time alone, you become familiar with your emotional triggers, and this familiarity allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Emotional clarity grows in silence because without constant input, your feelings become easier to identify, understand, and manage. As your emotional awareness deepens, your relationships improve because you are no longer projecting unresolved feelings onto others. Being alone strengthens your boundaries because you learn what you can tolerate, what you need, and what you must protect in order to remain emotionally balanced. You develop emotional maturity when you realize that no one else is responsible for your inner state, and this realization gives you the power to change your life from the inside out. Solitude teaches patience with yourself, allowing you to move through growth without self-judgment or shame. As emotional power grows, your fear of being alone fades because you recognize that solitude is no longer a threat, but a source of strength. You become more grounded because your emotions are no longer scattered across external situations, but centered within you. This emotional stability allows you to face challenges with courage instead of avoidance. You stop seeking constant reassurance because you trust your ability to handle what you feel. Your confidence deepens because you are no longer dependent on others to feel whole. Emotional power transforms your life because you begin making decisions based on clarity instead of fear. In solitude, you discover that emotional strength is not loud or aggressive, but steady, quiet, and deeply rooted. As you continue developing emotional power through solitude, you begin noticing that your reactions grow slower and more thoughtful, because you are no longer being pulled into emotional storms created by other people's expectations, fears, or unresolved issues. You start recognizing that emotional power is the ability to remain steady inside yourself, even when life becomes chaotic. And this steadiness becomes one of your greatest sources of strength. Being alone gives you the space to understand your emotional history, because without distraction, you can finally see where certain feelings were formed and why they still appear. And this understanding allows healing to take place. You become more forgiving with yourself, because solitude shows you that your emotions are not enemies, but messages guiding you toward growth and awareness. As your emotional awareness deepens, your self-respect grows, because you are no longer abandoning yourself in difficult moments, but standing with yourself through them. This loyalty to your inner world builds unbreakable confidence, because you know you can trust yourself regardless of circumstances. Emotional power allows you to choose peace over chaos, because you no longer feel the need to engage in unnecessary conflict or emotional drama. You begin attracting healthier relationships because your emotional stability creates an environment of safety, clarity, and mutual respect. Solitude teaches you how to regulate stress, because you learn how to calm your nervous system without external distractions. Your intuition sharpens because your emotional world is no longer clouded by noise, allowing you to sense what feels right and what does not. Emotional power gives you the courage to walk away from what harms you, because you trust your inner signals instead of doubting them. You stop fearing emotional pain because you know you have the strength to experience it without being destroyed by it. This strength allows you to take risks, grow, and evolve, because fear no longer controls your decisions. As emotional power grows, you become more authentic, because you no longer hide your feelings to protect your image or avoid judgment. You begin living with emotional integrity, where your actions reflect your inner truth instead of external pressure. Solitude strengthens your connection with yourself, making you less vulnerable to manipulation and emotional dependence. You start creating a life based on alignment instead of approval, because emotional power gives you the clarity to choose what truly matters. With this strength, you face the world with calm determination instead of emotional chaos. Your life becomes more peaceful, because you are no longer at war with your own emotions. By choosing solitude, you build emotional power that supports you in every area of your life. Chapter 7. Building Discipline in Solitude. Building discipline in solitude begins when you stop relying on motivation, encouragement, or external pressure to guide your actions, and instead commit to showing up for yourself consistently, even when no one is watching and nothing feels exciting, because this is where true discipline is forged. When you are alone, your habits become visible, because there is no audience to impress and no distraction to hide behind. And this visibility forces honesty, allowing you to confront where you are consistent and where you are avoiding responsibility. Discipline grows when you keep promises to yourself in private, because every small commitment you honor strengthens your sense of self-trust and reinforces your identity as someone who follows through. Solitude removes the comfort of accountability partners and external reminders, placing the responsibility for your progress entirely in your hands. And this weight, once accepted, becomes your greatest source of strength. When no one is around to observe your actions, your true character reveals itself. And this revelation gives you the opportunity to shape yourself intentionally instead of drifting through life on autopilot. Discipline in solitude teaches you how to manage your time wisely, because without social interference, you must decide how each hour is used, and those decisions slowly construct your future. As you commit to this process, your mind becomes sharper, because you are training it to focus on what matters instead of what is easy. And this focus carries into every area of your life. You begin to understand that discipline is not about force, but about structure, creating routines that support your goals and protect your energy from unnecessary distractions. Solitude strengthens your willpower because you are repeatedly choosing effort over comfort without external reinforcement, and this repetition builds mental endurance that is difficult to break. Every disciplined action becomes a quiet declaration of self-respect, proving to yourself that you are capable of growth even when conditions are not ideal. Building discipline alone teaches patience, because progress feels slower without immediate feedback. Yet this slow growth is often the most stable and long-lasting. You start recognizing how much time was once lost to distraction, and this awareness makes your new routines feel powerful, because each focused hour moves you closer to your vision. Discipline in solitude reduces inner conflict, because your actions begin aligning with your values, creating a sense of integrity that brings deep satisfaction. You become less dependent on mood, because discipline teaches you how to act regardless of how you feel, and this emotional independence is one of the strongest forms of self-control. The more you practice discipline alone, the more confident you become, because you know your progress is real and not dependent on external circumstances. Solitude creates an environment where discipline can grow without interference, allowing you to experiment, refine, and improve without pressure or comparison. As discipline strengthens, your identity changes, because you no longer see yourself as someone who tries, but as someone who does. You begin trusting your future, because your daily actions consistently support the life you are building. Discipline gives your days structure, your goals direction, and your mind clarity, creating stability in an otherwise unpredictable world. By building discipline in solitude, you become the architect of your own growth, shaping your life with intention, effort, and commitment. As discipline deepens in solitude, you begin noticing how your self-control expands beyond work and productivity, influencing your thoughts, your emotions, and the way you respond to challenges. Because discipline is not limited to action, it becomes a way of being. You stop negotiating with yourself, because consistency replaces excuses. And this shift removes the internal conflict that once drained your energy and focus. The more you act with discipline, the more your mind learns that discomfort is temporary and that effort leads to progress. And this understanding strengthens your resilience. Solitude becomes a training ground for your character, because every choice you make is a reflection of who you are becoming, and without witnesses, you are free to grow without fear of judgment. Discipline in solitude teaches you how to delay gratification, because you begin choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort, and this skill is essential for building a meaningful life. You become more intentional with your energy, because discipline teaches you how to invest yourself in what truly matters, instead of scattering your attention across distractions. As your routines solidify, your confidence stabilizes, because you know you can rely on yourself even when motivation disappears. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, because discipline trains you to act in imperfect conditions, and this ability keeps your life moving forward. The strength you build alone becomes visible in everything you do, because your actions begin reflecting consistency, focus, and self-respect. Discipline reduces anxiety because structure creates predictability, and predictability calms the mind. You develop emotional steadiness because discipline teaches you how to remain grounded even when life feels chaotic. The more disciplined you become, the more freedom you experience, because self-control eliminates the chaos created by impulsive decisions. You learn how to finish what you start, because discipline replaces the cycle of excitement and abandonment with steady progress. Solitude allows you to strengthen your habits without comparison, letting you focus on your own growth instead of measuring yourself against others. As discipline grows, so does your sense of purpose, because your daily actions align with your long-term vision. You begin trusting the process of growth, because you see how small efforts compound into powerful change. Discipline sharpens your priorities, because you become clear about what deserves your time and attention. Your future becomes more secure, because your present actions are building it intentionally. The discipline you cultivate alone becomes the foundation of your independence, confidence, and resilience. By mastering discipline in solitude, you prepare yourself for any challenge because your strength is no longer dependent on circumstances or support. Chapter 8. Turning isolation into focus and purpose. Turning isolation into focus and purpose begins when you stop treating isolation as something to escape and start seeing it as a tool that can be shaped, directed, and used to build the life you want, because isolation itself is neutral, but what you do with it determines whether it weakens you or strengthens you. When you are isolated, distractions fall away, leaving you alone with your time, your thoughts, and your potential, and this environment becomes fertile ground for focus, because nothing competes for your attention except the choices you make. Focus grows in isolation because your energy is no longer scattered across unnecessary conversations, social expectations, and emotional entanglements, allowing your mind to concentrate fully on what matters. As focus strengthens, purpose begins to emerge, because sustained attention naturally reveals what feels meaningful, what holds your interest, and what direction your life wants to move. Isolation gives you the opportunity to observe your habits honestly, noticing where your time goes, what drains you, and what builds you. And this awareness becomes the foundation of intentional change. When you commit to using isolation wisely, your days become structured around growth instead of distraction, and this structure transforms isolation from emptiness into momentum. Purpose deepens as you work in silence, because you are no longer performing for others, but building something that matters to you, and this internal motivation is far more powerful than external pressure. Focus in isolation teaches you how to enter deep work, where your mind becomes absorbed in meaningful tasks, allowing you to produce work of higher quality and greater impact. The more you practice this, the more your confidence grows, because you see tangible results created by your own discipline and commitment. Isolation sharpens your sense of direction, because without constant influence from others, your values, priorities, and goals become clearer. You begin to recognize that purpose is not found through social approval, but through alignment between your actions and your inner truth. As your focus improves, your life feels less chaotic, because your energy is directed intentionally instead of being pulled in random directions. Isolation teaches you how to manage your time effectively, because each day becomes a reflection of your choices, and those choices determine your progress. You start experiencing a deeper sense of fulfillment, because your efforts are connected to something meaningful instead of being consumed by distraction. Purpose grows stronger when you consistently invest your energy into building your skills, your knowledge, and your character. Isolation becomes a training ground for excellence, because you are no longer distracted by comparison or competition. Your mind becomes quieter and more disciplined, allowing you to think clearly and act with precision. Focus allows you to transform ordinary days into productive, meaningful experiences that contribute to your long-term vision. As your sense of purpose strengthens, your motivation becomes internal and stable, no longer dependent on praise or recognition. By turning isolation into focus and purpose, you convert solitude into one of the most powerful tools for personal transformation. As you continue using isolation as a tool for growth, you begin noticing that your confidence is no longer built on how you appear to others, but on what you are quietly building when no one is watching. And this form of confidence is stable, grounded, and deeply empowering. Isolation teaches you patience, because meaningful progress requires time, consistency, and trust in the process. And when you are alone, you learn how to keep going even when results are slow and invisible. You stop fearing your own thoughts, because isolation forces you to become comfortable with your inner world, and this comfort becomes the foundation of mental strength. Your sense of purpose becomes clearer as you distance yourself from unnecessary noise, because without constant influence, your values emerge naturally. Focus deepens when you eliminate the urge to escape discomfort through distraction, and this discipline strengthens your mind and sharpens your will. You begin organizing your life around what truly matters, because isolation removes the pressure to conform and allows you to design your days intentionally. As your habits improve, your future becomes more predictable, because your daily actions consistently support your long-term vision. Isolation strengthens your independence, because you learn how to rely on yourself for motivation, direction, and emotional stability. Your ability to think deeply increases, because your mind is no longer fragmented by constant interruption. Purpose becomes part of your identity, because your actions align with your beliefs and goals. You start trusting your path because you see how your effort compounds over time into real progress. Isolation allows you to reconnect with your creativity because your mind finally has space to explore ideas without pressure. Your focus becomes a shield against negativity, protecting your energy and preserving your clarity. You become more disciplined because your environment supports your growth instead of undermining it. Isolation gives you the courage to pursue goals that others may not understand, because your motivation comes from within. Your life begins to feel more meaningful because each day contributes to something greater than temporary comfort. You learn how to move forward without constant reassurance, building self-trust and emotional independence. As your purpose strengthens, your distractions lose their power because your attention is anchored to what matters. Isolation becomes a source of stability because it allows you to build your life on intention instead of reaction. By turning isolation into focus and purpose, you create a foundation of strength that supports everything you do. Chapter 9. Learning who you are without the noise. Learning who you are without the noise begins when you step away from the constant stream of voices, opinions, expectations, and comparisons that have been shaping your identity without your permission, and in that space of quiet, you finally get the chance to encounter yourself without distortion. When the noise fades, you start noticing how many of your thoughts were never truly yours, but absorbed from the world around you, and this realization becomes the beginning of self-discovery and emotional independence. Without constant influence, your mind becomes calmer, and in that calm, your authentic desires, values, and beliefs begin to surface, revealing who you are beneath all the external conditioning. Silence allows you to observe your reactions, your patterns, and your choices clearly, because there is no distraction pulling you away from your inner experience. As the noise disappears, your priorities become clearer, because you are no longer chasing what everyone else values, but discovering what matters to you personally. Learning who you are requires honesty, and silence creates the environment where honesty becomes unavoidable, because you cannot hide from yourself when the world grows quiet. You begin to recognize where you have been living for approval instead of alignment, and this awareness gives you the power to choose differently. Without the pressure of constant comparison, your self-worth stabilizes, because you are no longer measuring your life against someone else's timeline. You develop a deeper connection with your own thoughts, learning which ones support your growth and which ones limit your potential. As self-understanding deepens, your decisions become more intentional because they come from clarity instead of confusion. You start trusting your own judgment because your mind is no longer clouded by the influence of others. The absence of noise strengthens your sense of direction because your inner compass finally becomes audible. You begin recognizing what drains you and what builds you, allowing you to design your life around what truly serves your well-being. Your emotional world becomes more stable because you are no longer reacting to constant stimulation. As your identity strengthens, your confidence grows quietly because you are no longer dependent on external validation. Learning who you are without noise also teaches you patience because self-discovery unfolds slowly and steadily. You stop rushing your growth because you understand that becoming yourself is not a race, but a process. The quieter your life becomes, the more meaningful your choices feel because they are rooted in self-awareness instead of impulse. You begin building a life that reflects who you truly are, not who you were expected to be. In silence, you discover that your real self has been waiting for you all along. As you continue learning who you are without the noise, you begin feeling a sense of inner stability that no external situation can easily disturb, because your sense of self is no longer built on shifting opinions, but on understanding and acceptance. You start noticing that many of your fears were fueled by constant exposure to other people's expectations, and as that exposure fades, those fears begin losing their power over you. Without noise, your emotions become easier to understand because they are no longer tangled with external pressure and social comparison. You gain the ability to sit with yourself without discomfort because you no longer need constant stimulation to avoid your inner world. This comfort with yourself strengthens your independence because you stop seeking escape in distraction and begin finding peace in presence. You develop clarity about your boundaries because you recognize what feels right and what does not without being influenced by outside voices. As your awareness deepens, your self-respect grows because you are honoring your truth instead of silencing it. You begin choosing your actions with intention because you understand what aligns with your values and what pulls you away from them. The quieter your life becomes, the more focused your mind feels, allowing you to engage fully with your goals and responsibilities. You stop chasing approval because your worth is no longer defined by attention or recognition. Your life becomes simpler because you are no longer carrying the emotional weight of other people's expectations. You start trusting your own direction because your choices are grounded in self-awareness instead of fear. Learning who you are without noise gives you courage because you realize you are capable of standing alone in your truth. Your relationships become healthier because you engage from authenticity instead of need. As your inner world strengthens, your outer life becomes more stable because you are no longer pulled in conflicting directions. You gain emotional resilience because you understand yourself deeply and respond thoughtfully to challenges. Your sense of purpose becomes clearer because it is no longer shaped by trends or comparison. The more you live this way, the more aligned your life feels, because your actions reflect who you truly are. You begin building a future based on your values instead of other people's expectations. By learning who you are without the noise, you create a life of clarity, confidence, and lasting peace. Chapter 10. How to become unshakable on your own. Becoming unshakable on your own begins when you stop looking outside yourself for stability and start building it within. Because anything that depends on external conditions can always be taken away, but the strength you build internally stays with you no matter what life brings. When you rely on yourself emotionally, mentally, and practically, your life stops feeling fragile, because you are no longer placing your sense of safety in people, situations, or outcomes that you cannot control. You begin developing this inner stability by learning how to stay calm when things go wrong, because calmness is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of control over your own responses. As you practice standing on your own, your confidence grows quietly, because you are proving to yourself every day that you can handle whatever comes without collapsing or losing direction. Becoming unshakable requires emotional discipline, because your emotions no longer run your life, but serve as signals that you observe and manage with awareness. When you stop seeking constant reassurance, your mind becomes steadier, because your sense of worth no longer rises and falls with other people's opinions. Solitude strengthens this process, because when you spend time alone, you are forced to confront your fears, doubts, and insecurities. And in facing them, you build the courage that makes you unshakable. You start trusting your decisions, because you learn from both success and failure without abandoning yourself. And this trust becomes a powerful anchor in uncertain situations. Being unshakable means staying grounded when plans change, when people disappoint you, and when outcomes are not what you expected. And this grounding gives you emotional freedom. You develop resilience by continuing forward even when motivation fades, because discipline carries you when feelings cannot. As your self-trust grows, you become less reactive, because you are no longer dependent on immediate validation or approval. Your sense of direction becomes stronger, because you are guided by values instead of external pressure. Being unshakable allows you to face criticism without losing your sense of self, because you understand your worth is not defined by agreement. You stop fearing loneliness, because you are comfortable with your own company and confident in your own strength. This independence allows you to choose relationships freely instead of from need or fear. You learn how to regulate stress, because your inner world is no longer controlled by circumstances. Becoming unshakable teaches you patience, because you stop rushing your growth and trust the process. You develop emotional endurance, allowing you to remain steady even when life becomes overwhelming. The more you practice this way of living, the more powerful your presence becomes, because you carry stability into every situation. By building this strength on your own, you create a foundation that no one can shake, no matter what happens around you. As you continue building yourself into someone unshakable, you begin noticing that your emotional reactions lose their intensity, because you are no longer ruled by fear, insecurity, or uncertainty, but guided by understanding and self-control. You start seeing challenges as training instead of threats, because each difficulty strengthens your ability to remain steady under pressure, and this perspective alone transforms your relationship with adversity. Your inner voice becomes calmer, because you trust yourself to handle whatever arises, and this trust reduces anxiety about the future. You stop overthinking every decision, because confidence grows from experience and reflection, not from constant doubt and hesitation. Being unshakable does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being controlled by what you feel, allowing you to move forward with clarity even when emotions are intense. As your independence deepens, you begin choosing peace over chaos, because you recognize how much energy is wasted on unnecessary conflict. You become more selective with your commitments because you understand the value of your time, your focus, and your emotional well-being. Your life becomes more stable because your sense of security is no longer tied to outcomes, people, or external validation. You begin trusting the process of life because you trust your ability to navigate it. The more you grow into this version of yourself, the less you fear uncertainty, because uncertainty no longer threatens your sense of identity. You carry yourself differently, with quiet confidence and steady presence, and this presence influences every environment you enter. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily because your actions reflect your values clearly. Your relationships become healthier because you engage from strength instead of dependence. You develop emotional clarity because your mind is no longer clouded by constant worry. Becoming unshakable allows you to walk away from what no longer serves you without fear of loss. You become more resilient because setbacks no longer define you, they refine you. Your future feels more secure because your foundation is built on inner strength instead of fragile conditions. You start living with intention because every choice reflects your commitment to your own growth. You recognize your own worth deeply because you are no longer seeking it from the outside world. By becoming unshakable on your own, you create a life that remains steady, strong, and meaningful, no matter what comes your way. Chapter 11. Choosing your future over comfort. Choosing your future over comfort begins when you recognize that comfort is not the same as peace, and that many of the things that feel comfortable in the moment quietly steal from your future by keeping you small, distracted, and stuck in familiar patterns that never lead to real growth. Most people choose comfort because it feels safe, but safety without progress eventually becomes a cage, and the longer you stay inside it, the harder it becomes to step out and face the uncertainty that real change requires. When you choose your future, you choose discomfort, because growth always asks you to leave what is familiar and walk into what is unknown, and this decision reshapes your identity from someone who survives into someone who builds. Choosing your future means saying no to habits that feel good now but harm you later, and yes to actions that are difficult now but will free you later. And this trade is the foundation of every meaningful life. Comfort keeps you entertained, but your future demands your attention, your effort, and your discipline. And the moment you understand this, your priorities begin to shift. When you stop living for ease and start living for purpose, your life gains direction because your actions are now guided by where you want to go instead of where you are comfortable staying. This choice requires courage because it often means walking alone for a while, leaving behind familiar routines, people, and excuses that once defined your world. Choosing your future over comfort strengthens your willpower because you are constantly choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure, and this discipline becomes one of your greatest assets. As you continue making this choice, your confidence grows because each difficult decision becomes proof that you are capable of more than you once believed. Your identity shifts as you stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids discomfort and start seeing yourself as someone who uses it as fuel for growth. You begin building habits that support your vision, not your cravings, and this shift quietly transforms your daily life. Comfort no longer controls you because your focus is on who you are becoming, not on what feels easy in the moment. Choosing your future teaches patience because results take time, and patience becomes the bridge between effort and achievement. You stop making excuses for yourself because your commitment to your future becomes stronger than your attachment to comfort. This path is not glamorous, but it is powerful, because it builds strength that lasts instead of satisfaction that fades. The more you walk this path, the more your life aligns with your goals, because your choices now reflect your values. You develop resilience because you learn how to move forward even when things feel uncomfortable, uncertain, or slow. Your focus sharpens because your energy is no longer wasted on distractions that do not contribute to your growth. Choosing your future over comfort changes how you see challenges, because they become opportunities to strengthen your character instead of obstacles to avoid. By making this choice daily, you begin creating a life that is not easy, but meaningful, stable, and deeply fulfilling. As you continue choosing your future over comfort, you begin noticing how much mental and emotional energy you once spent protecting your comfort zone, and how that same energy now fuels your progress, your confidence, and your sense of purpose. You stop negotiating with your potential because you understand that every time you choose comfort over growth, you delay the life you want to live, and this awareness strengthens your commitment to change. Your decision-making becomes clearer because you no longer ask what feels easiest, but what moves you forward, and this question alone reshapes the direction of your life. You develop a deeper respect for yourself because you are honoring your future instead of sacrificing it for temporary ease. As comfort loses its hold on you, your mind becomes stronger because you are no longer avoiding challenges, but using them to build discipline and resilience. You start feeling proud of your effort because you know you are no longer wasting your potential by staying where it is safe. Your sense of identity evolves because you no longer see yourself as someone who avoids discomfort, but as someone who pursues growth with intention. Choosing your future means letting go of certain pleasures, habits, and even relationships that no longer serve your long-term vision, and this release creates space for new opportunities to enter your life. You stop fearing failure because failure becomes feedback, and feedback becomes progress. Your life gains momentum because each decision compounds into forward movement. You become more focused because your attention is anchored to your goals instead of scattered across distractions. You develop emotional endurance because you are no longer fragile when things feel difficult. Choosing your future strengthens your independence because you stop waiting for the right moment and start creating it. Your priorities become clear because you understand what truly matters and what can be let go. You learn to trust yourself because your actions consistently reflect your commitment to growth. You become less reactive because your emotions no longer control your direction. The more you choose your future, the more stable your life becomes, because it is built on intention instead of impulse. You begin experiencing a quiet satisfaction that comfort never provided, because it comes from knowing you are living with purpose. Your path becomes your own, because you are no longer following convenience, but conviction. By choosing your future over comfort, you build a life that is not easy, but strong, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling. Chapter 12. Walking alone until you become someone worth following. Walking alone until you become someone worth following begins with the understanding that leadership is not built through attention, titles, or approval, but through character, discipline, and the choices you make when no one is watching. When you choose to walk alone, you remove the safety net of constant support and validation, forcing yourself to rely on your own strength, judgment, and commitment, and this reliance becomes the foundation of real leadership. Most people want to be followed before they have built anything worth following, but true influence grows from consistency, integrity, and the example you set through your actions, not your words. Walking alone teaches you how to lead yourself first, because before you can guide others, You must learn how to stay focused, disciplined, and steady through uncertainty and hardship. This path is not glamorous because it requires long periods of silence, effort, and patience, but it builds a depth of strength that cannot be faked or borrowed. As you continue walking alone, your confidence grows quietly because it is no longer dependent on recognition, but on the knowledge that you are becoming someone reliable, capable, and resilient. You stop chasing approval because you understand that true respect is earned through action and character, not through popularity or attention. Walking alone refines your values because without external influence, you must decide what you stand for, what you tolerate, and what you will no longer accept in your life. This clarity strengthens your identity because your choices become aligned with who you are becoming, not with who others want you to be. The longer you walk this path, the more your presence changes, because people sense stability, purpose, and confidence in those who have built themselves through solitude and discipline. You learn how to make difficult decisions without needing reassurance, because your inner compass becomes strong enough to guide you forward. Walking alone develops patience, because growth takes time, and patience becomes the bridge between effort and transformation. You begin trusting the process of becoming, because each day of effort builds something real, even when progress is slow and invisible. Your life becomes more intentional because you are no longer reacting to circumstances, but creating direction through your choices. Walking alone forces you to confront your weaknesses honestly, because there is nowhere to hide in solitude, and this honesty becomes the starting point of real growth. As your discipline strengthens, your habits improve, and your habits shape the future you are building. You stop comparing yourself to others because your focus is on becoming your best self, not on measuring your progress against someone else's path. Walking alone teaches you emotional strength because you learn how to carry yourself through challenges without collapsing or quitting. The more you grow in solitude, the more natural leadership becomes, because people are drawn to those who are grounded, consistent, and self-directed. By continuing to walk alone, you prepare yourself to become someone others trust, respect, and choose to follow. As you continue walking alone, you begin to notice that your life becomes quieter but stronger, because you are no longer surrounded by distractions that once kept you busy but unfulfilled, and this quiet becomes the environment where your best self is built. You start carrying yourself differently because the work you are doing in private is shaping your confidence in public. And this quiet transformation is something others feel, even if they cannot explain it. Walking alone teaches you how to stay consistent because without an audience, you must learn to motivate yourself from within, and this internal motivation becomes the engine of your growth. You stop needing validation because you see your progress clearly in the habits you build, the discipline you maintain, and the strength you develop. The more you grow, the more you attract the right people, because your energy shifts from seeking attention to creating value. Walking alone sharpens your thinking because you spend time reflecting, learning, and refining your direction without external interference. Your emotional resilience strengthens because you learn how to handle disappointment, setbacks, and uncertainty without losing your sense of self. You begin choosing your actions with purpose because every decision becomes a reflection of the future you are building. The patience you develop in solitude allows you to endure long periods of effort without immediate reward, and this patience becomes one of your greatest strengths. Walking alone teaches you how to remain calm under pressure because you have already faced your own fears and doubts in silence. As you become more grounded, your presence becomes steadier, and people begin to trust you naturally. You stop rushing your journey because you understand that becoming someone worth following takes time, consistency, and deep inner work. Walking alone creates clarity because you are no longer torn between different expectations and influences. You develop self-respect because you are honoring your commitment to growth even when it is difficult. The strength you build in solitude becomes visible in your actions, your decisions, and your character. You become a leader not by trying to be one, but by becoming someone who lives with integrity, discipline, and purpose. Walking alone prepares you for responsibility because you learn how to carry yourself and your future without depending on others. Your life begins reflecting the work you have done, and this reflection inspires others more than words ever could. As you continue this path, you realize that the loneliness you once feared was actually the doorway to your transformation. By walking alone until you become someone worth following, you create a life of strength, clarity, and lasting impact. In the end, walking alone is not something to fear, it is something to honor. The time you spend with yourself is the time you are shaping your future. When you choose solitude over noise, focus over distraction, and growth over comfort, you are choosing a life that most people will never have the courage to build. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. The strongest paths are often the quietest ones. In that silence, you learn discipline, you learn self-respect. You learn how to trust your own direction without needing permission or applause. So if you are alone right now, don't rush to escape it. Use it, build in it, become in it. Because when you finally step back into the world, you won't just belong, you will stand out.